The Xalorians had been preparing for this moment for centuries. They had built the galaxy's most advanced war machines, towering battle mechs that could obliterate entire fleets with a single strike. The Titan-class mechs were their greatest achievement, a symbol of their unrivaled technological prowess. No one could match their destructive capabilities. No one. That is, except the Xalorians themselves. The intergalactic summit was being held on their homeworld, Salar Prime, a planet of towering mountains and vast deserts, where war had shaped the evolution of every species that inhabited it. This was the Xalorians' time to flaunt their dominance. Alien dignitaries and military leaders from dozens of worlds had arrived, each eager to witness the unveiling of the Titans. The galaxy had heard of them, but now they would see them in all their glory. General Vrox stood at the front of the arena, his massive form cloaked in ceremonial armor, his face stern and unforgiving. He was the military leader of the Xalorian Empire, and his presence commanded attention. His soldiers flanked him, their posture rigid as they prepared to demonstrate the terrifying might of the Titans. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the stadium where the mechs would perform. The crowd, a mix of alien species ranging from towering insectoids to sleek, humanoid figures, murmured in anticipation. The air was thick with tension. All eyes were on the massive platform in the center of the arena, where the Titans stood motionless, their sleek, metallic bodies gleaming in the fading light. The mechs were colossal, standing at over 50 feet tall, with weapon systems integrated into every inch of their design. Each mech was an embodiment of destruction: massive energy cannons, laser-guided missile launchers, and advanced shielding systems that made them nearly indestructible. General Vrox raised a hand, signaling for the demonstration to begin. A group of his most trusted soldiers climbed into the cockpit of one of the mechs, their fingers flying over the controls with practiced ease. The massive machine came to life, its servos whirring as it slowly rose from its resting position. The crowd gasped as the mech took its first steps, the ground trembling beneath its weight. Vrox's voice boomed across the arena, amplified by the speakers. "Behold the Titan-class mech, the ultimate weapon in the galaxy. It is impervious to all but the most devastating of attacks. Nothing can match its might on the battlefield." The Titan moved forward, effortlessly crushing a row of massive boulders with a single step. The audience erupted into applause, their awe palpable. But amidst the crowd, a group of humans, 5 in total, watched in stunned silence. They were not soldiers nor diplomats, but engineers and innovators, led by Michael Cooper, an unassuming man in his early 30s. Cooper had never been one for spectacle, but this was different. The Xalorians may have the most powerful war machines in the galaxy, but they had one thing wrong. They thought only brute force mattered. As the demonstration continued, the Xalorians exhibited the full range of the Titan-class mech's capabilities. One of the mechs fired a volley of high-powered missiles that split the air like thunder. Their targets, a series of enemy tanks, obliterated in a flash of light and smoke. The crowd cheered, utterly captivated by the sheer display of power. The mechs were everything the Xalorians had promised, each step a reminder of their military superiority. Michael Cooper leaned forward in his seat, his sharp eyes following every move of the mechs with a mix of fascination and calculation. Unlike the rest of the crowd, he wasn't fixated on the destruction. He was studying the machines themselves, their movements, their energy flow, the way they handled the terrain. There was no doubt in his mind that the Titans were masterpieces of engineering, but they were also predictable. He had spent his entire life working on machines, and even though these Titans were unlike anything humanity had ever created, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had their own limitations, ones the Xalorians hadn't yet noticed. Next to him, his team of engineers exchanged looks. There was Emma, a no-nonsense mechanic with a talent for electronics. Jack, a strategist who could map out any system in his head. And Rachel, an expert in propulsion and control systems. They, too, were watching intently. But unlike the Xalorians, they weren't merely impressed. They were calculating the odds. Could they adapt these massive machines for something else? Something the Xalorians hadn't even considered. The last of the demonstrations featured a test of the Mechs' combat capabilities, an obstacle course designed to showcase their agility and firepower. The Titan weaved through a series of simulated enemy forces, its arms swinging with deadly precision. It crushed everything in its path, leaving no survivors. The Xalorians were basking in their moment of triumph, and the audience seemed ready to crown them as the ultimate power in the galaxy. Then Michael Cooper stood. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his hand in the air or demand attention in the same way others might. Instead, his calm voice cut through the hushed atmosphere. "General Vrox," he said, his tone polite but firm, "how fast can these mechs go?" The question seemed innocuous at first, but a ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. Fast. These were not machines meant for speed. They were weapons of war, built to endure, to dominate. Vrox turned, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Speed." He laughed, a low chuckle that resonated in the silent air. "You seek to compare the Titans to your crude transport vehicles, human. These machines are built to crush, not race." Michael didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, the kind of smile that made his team exchange glances. "No, General. What I meant was, would it be possible to race them? A competition, perhaps. A test of skill and agility, not just strength." The silence was deafening. The Xalorian commander raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but incredulous. The humans wanted to race the most advanced war machines in the galaxy. Were they insane? And yet, the glint of something in Michael's eyes, something daring, almost playful, made Vrox hesitate. The intergalactic summit was being held on their homeworld, Salar Prime, a planet of towering mountains and vast deserts where war had shaped the evolution of every species that inhabited it. This was the Xalorians' time to flaunt their dominance. Alien dignitaries and military leaders from dozens of worlds had arrived, each eager to witness the unveiling of the Titans. The galaxy had heard of them, but now they would see them in all their glory. General Vrox stood at the front of the arena, his massive form cloaked in ceremonial armor, his face stern and unforgiving. He was the military leader of the Xalorian Empire, and his presence commanded attention. His soldiers flanked him, their posture rigid as they prepared to demonstrate the terrifying might of the Titans. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the stadium where the Mechs would perform. The crowd, a mix of alien species ranging from towering insectoids to sleek, humanoid figures, murmured in anticipation. The air was thick with tension. All eyes were on the massive platform in the center of the arena, where the Titans stood motionless, their sleek, metallic bodies gleaming in the fading light. The Mechs were colossal, standing at over 50 feet tall, with weapon systems integrated into every inch of their design. Each mech was an embodiment of destruction: massive energy cannons, laser-guided missile launchers, and advanced shielding systems that made them nearly indestructible. General Vrox raised a hand, signaling for the demonstration to begin. A group of his most trusted soldiers climbed into the cockpit of one of the mechs, their fingers flying over the controls with practiced ease. The massive machine came to life, its servos whirring as it slowly rose from its resting position. The crowd gasped as the mech took its first steps, the ground trembling beneath its weight. Vrox's voice boomed across the arena, amplified by the speakers. "Behold the Titan-class mech, the ultimate weapon in the galaxy. It is impervious to all, but the most devastating of attacks. Nothing can match its might on the battlefield." The Titan moved forward, effortlessly crushing a row of massive boulders with a single step. The audience erupted into applause, their awe palpable. But amidst the crowd, a group of humans, 5 in total, watched in stunned silence. They were not soldiers nor diplomats, but engineers and innovators, led by Michael Cooper, an unassuming man in his early 30s. Cooper had never been one for spectacle. But this was different. The Xalorians may have the most powerful war machines in the galaxy, but they had one thing wrong. They thought only brute force mattered. For a moment, the arena was still. The air felt thick, charged with the weight of expectation, as every eye in the crowd turned toward Michael. General Vrox's gaze narrowed further, as if trying to read the human before him, to understand what could possibly compel anyone to make such an outlandish request. Race, Vrox repeated slowly, as though testing the word on his tongue. His voice was tinged with disbelief. You wish to race the Titan-class mechs. You think that your fragile species can outmaneuver the pinnacle of our engineering. The crowd seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the general's verdict. Some aliens snickered under their breath, shaking their heads in disbelief at the audacity of the humans. Others exchanged puzzled glances, unable to comprehend what was happening. Michael didn't flinch. He stood tall, his expression calm yet resolute. Yes, he said simply. I believe your mechs are fast, but I think we can show you something new, something you haven't yet thought of. There was a murmur of conversation among the crowd, a mix of confusion and curiosity. Michael's team, Emma, Jack, Rachel, and the others, watched in silent anticipation. They knew this was risky. It wasn't just about piloting the mechs, it was about demonstrating something deeper, a human trait that often went unnoticed by the galaxy's great powers: creativity. Vrox's lips curled into a thin, humorless smile. You are quite bold, human, he said, his voice carrying a weight of amusement. But a race? Very well. I will humor you. The Titans will race. We'll see if your ingenuity is enough to outrun the might of the Xalorians. He turned to one of his officers, a soldier with sharp features and a cold demeanor. Prepare the course, Vrox ordered. Let's give these humans their race. We'll show them what true power looks like. Within minutes, a sprawling course was set up across the vast desert terrain surrounding the arena. It was designed to test speed, agility, and endurance, an obstacle course filled with sharp turns, rocky cliffs, narrow ravines, and sudden drops. The challenge would be immense. For the Xalorians, it was a chance to demonstrate their superiority. For Michael and his team, it was a chance to prove something else entirely. Michael's eyes never left the general as he spoke to his team in a low, confident voice. We're not going to beat them with raw power, but we can outmaneuver them. We can make the Titans dance, and that's exactly what we'll do. The human engineers quickly climbed into the cockpit of their assigned Titan, their fingers flying over the controls as they began their final checks. The mech was a beast, its metal frame towering over them, but it was far from perfect. Michael's mind raced as he mentally mapped out the course ahead, focusing on what needed to be done. They had one shot at this, one chance to show the galaxy that humans could do what no one thought possible. As the Xalorians fired up their own mechs, the engines roaring with terrifying power, Michael couldn't help but grin. This was going to be interesting. The massive mechs stood at the starting line, their towering frames casting long shadows across the desert. The wind howled, whipping sand into the air, but the humans and Xalorians paid it no mind. The only sound that mattered was the low hum of the mech's engines, their power ready to be unleashed. The Xalorians stood tall and confident, their eyes cold and focused, while Michael and his team were tense but calm. They weren't just about to race, they were about to redefine what it meant to pilot a mech. General Vrox's voice crackled over the loudspeakers. This is no game, human. You will be crushed beneath the weight of the Titans. Prepare yourself. Michael smiled faintly. We'll see about that. The countdown began, the voice of the announcer echoing across the arena. 3, 2, 1, go. The moment the word left the speaker, the mechs surged forward. The Xalorians' Titans moved with terrifying speed, their massive feet pounding the ground, sending tremors through the sand. The earth quaked beneath their weight as they barreled toward the first obstacle, a cliffside that required precise navigation. But the humans? Michael had already anticipated this. His fingers flew over the controls with practiced ease. The human-piloted Titan lurched forward, its engines roaring as it swiftly veered to the left, avoiding the cliff altogether. The Xalorians, locked in their direct path, didn't adjust fast enough. The first mech was forced to slam on the brakes, its massive foot catching a loose rock and causing it to stumble. The second Xalorian mech wasn't much better. It managed to maintain its balance, but it lost valuable speed. The human Titan was already halfway across the first stretch, its agile movements leaving the Xalorians in the dust. Michael's mind raced, mapping the terrain in real time. This wasn't just about outpacing the Xalorians. It was about turning the battlefield into something they didn't expect. The Titan-class mechs weren't built for this kind of maneuvering, but Michael had modified theirs with a new suspension system designed for rapid adjustments and sharp turns. "We've got the lead," Michael said, his voice steady. "Keep it tight, everyone. Next obstacles ahead." Ahead, the course narrowed into a winding canyon, the walls looming high on either side. The path was treacherous, with jagged rocks threatening to tear apart anything that wasn't careful. The Xalorians hesitated for a fraction of a second, their machines built for raw power, not fine-tuned control. But Michael, he had already anticipated this. "Jack, engage the torque system," Michael called out. "We're going to hug the left wall." Jack, sitting in the co-pilot seat, quickly adjusted the settings, and with a smooth hum, the Titan's hydraulic arms locked into place. The mech slithered through the canyon with ease, every movement perfectly synchronized with the team's commands. The Xalorians, still struggling to adjust, watched as the human mech glided through the canyon like a well-oiled machine. Their mechs could smash through obstacles, but they couldn't navigate this kind of precision. The humans were leading, and the Xalorians could do nothing but chase. The race had taken an unexpected turn. The Xalorians, with their superior firepower and massive strength, had anticipated crushing the humans with brute force. But here they were, trailing behind in a test of agility and speed, qualities their massive machines were never built for. Michael Cooper and his team had turned the Titan-class mech into something it was never meant to be, a vehicle for precision, a race car disguised as a war machine. As the Titan surged through the narrow canyon, the wind howled and sand whipped against the armored hull, but it was almost as if the mech was dancing, twisting, turning, gliding with an uncanny grace. Behind them, the Xalorian mechs had to adjust their every move, their ponderous bodies unable to keep up. The first mech tried to take a sharp corner but miscalculated, its left foot crashing into the canyon wall, sending a shower of rocks tumbling down. It barely kept its balance, and the delay was enough for Michael's team to pull even further ahead. "Good work, Rachel," Michael called out. His co-pilot, Rachel Thomas, grinned and adjusted the throttle. The Titan's engines roared in response, pushing the mech even faster. But the race wasn't over, not by a long shot. Ahead, the landscape began to shift. The course turned upward, a steep incline leading toward the highest peak of the desert cliffs. This was the part of the race where power would come into play once again. The Xalorians would be able to push their Titans up the slope with brute force, while the humans would need to rely on their finely tuned systems and limited fuel reserves. "Get ready for the climb," Michael said, his voice firm. "This is where we'll need to make our move." The Titan began its ascent, its legs laboring to carry the heavy load up the mountain's face. Michael was already thinking 2 steps ahead. The Xalorians, no doubt, would rely on their raw power and think they could bulldoze through the climb. But Michael knew something they didn't. He had integrated a high-output booster system into their mech, designed for short bursts of extreme acceleration. It was risky, but it was their best shot. "Engage boosters on my mark," Michael instructed. Emma quickly typed in the command sequence. "Ready." The human mech's engines hummed louder as the boosters activated, releasing a burst of energy that propelled the Titan forward with astonishing speed. It shot up the slope, the force of the thrusters pushing the mech almost vertical. The Xalorians, caught off guard, hesitated for just a moment too long. Their Titans surged forward with immense power, but they couldn't match the sudden burst of energy that sent Michael's team rocketing ahead. "This is it," Michael said, his heart pounding in his chest. The summit was in sight, but the climb wasn't over yet. The humans were in the lead now. But the Xalorians weren't ready to give up just yet. Their pride, their arrogance, would drive them to push harder. Michael couldn't afford a single mistake. One wrong move, and everything they had gained would be lost. The finish line was drawing closer. The final stretch of the canyon was narrowing. Michael's Titan was moving with a calculated grace, weaving between rock formations as it descended into a tighter passageway. The Xalorian Titans were still trailing behind, but their size and weight were starting to show their limitations. Each time the narrow canyon forced them to adjust, they slowed. Their massive forms crashed against the rocks, creating minor tremors that sent debris falling from above. Meanwhile, Michael's team made sharp, almost effortless turns, keeping ahead by a few precious meters. "This is it," Rachel said quietly, her eyes scanning the controls. She was focused, but the adrenaline was pumping through her veins. "We're almost out." Up ahead, the exit to the canyon loomed, a jagged opening between two towering cliff walls. Beyond it, the open desert awaited, the final stretch of the race that would test the limits of speed. The finish line was just beyond that horizon. If they could make it to the desert, the humans might have a chance. Then came a low, menacing hum. Too close, too fast. Michael's eyes darted to his screen. The Xalorian Titan behind them was firing its thrusters, pushing hard to gain ground. But it wasn't just speed they were after. General Vrox's mech had deployed a set of long-range plasma cannons, and they were primed to fire. "Brace for impact," Michael shouted. Before anyone could react, a series of plasma bolts streaked through the air, the heat from their charge warping the air around them. The first bolt grazed the Titan's left arm, singing the metal, while the second strike slammed into the ground directly in front of them, throwing up a shower of rock and dirt. The Titan bucked under the impact, its footing shaky as dust clouded the air. "Damn it, they're not playing fair," Jack growled. Michael fought the instinct to panic. This was the moment where everything could fall apart, where their calculated advantage could be destroyed by raw aggression. But Michael wasn't about to let it slip away. His eyes remained fixed on the exit of the canyon. They had one chance to push through, one final maneuver that could break the Xalorians' pursuit. "Rachel, engage the stabilization jets," Michael ordered, his voice cool despite the rising tension. "Jack, prepare to lock the maneuvering thrusters." Without hesitation, the team worked in perfect unison. Rachel tapped a series of buttons on her console, activating the stabilization jets, while Jack prepared the thrusters for the final boost. The human mech systems hummed to life, and with a violent thrust, the Titan lurched forward with a burst of speed. The canyon walls seemed to narrow even further as Michael drove the mechs toward the exit, barely avoiding the falling debris from the Xalorian blast. With a final push, the human Titan shot out of the canyon's mouth, emerging into the wide open desert. But even as the mech hit the open air, Michael could feel the rumble of the Xalorians gaining ground again. The finish line was within sight, but the Xalorians weren't giving up. The true race was about to begin. The open desert stretched out before them like a vast, unforgiving wasteland. Sand whipped across the ground, the sun beating down with relentless intensity. The wide expanse of open terrain should have been a moment to relax, to catch their breath. But Michael's team knew better. The final stretch was where the race would truly be decided. The Xalorians, with their sheer power and weaponry, were closing in fast. Their mechs were designed for speed in open spaces, and General Vrox wasn't about to lose to a bunch of humans on a dare. Michael's eyes locked onto the horizon, where the finish line stood, marked by a towering flag fluttering in the wind. It was still several kilometers away, but he could already feel the pounding of the Silurians' engines creeping closer, the tremors beneath the sand, a reminder that their adversaries weren't going to let them win without a fight. "Jack, get the torque system ready," Michael said, his voice steady despite the rising pressure. "We need that burst." Rachel was adjusting the power systems, checking their fuel reserves. "We've got about 2 minutes of juice left before we need to recharge, but we can push it." "This is it, Michael. We can do this." The human-piloted Titan surged forward, the heavy thud of its feet shaking the earth beneath it as it accelerated. Michael felt the familiar rush of adrenaline flood his system. Every part of him was tuned to the mech's movements, anticipating the next turn, the next obstacle. The desert was flat, just miles of sand and jagged rocks. But there was something to this terrain that made it more dangerous than it first appeared. Hidden cracks in the earth, sudden drops, unexpected dips. One wrong move, and the Titan would lose valuable time. Behind them, the Silurians had fully engaged their thrusters, closing the gap quickly. Their lead mech was almost on top of them now, its weapons primed for another assault. Plasma cannons hummed menacingly as Vrox's voice crackled through the comms. "You think you can outrun us, humans? You are nothing but insects beneath our boot." Michael gritted his teeth. "We're not insects, General. We're not even close." The Titan's forward sensors beeped, indicating the proximity of the Silurian mech. Michael's heart raced. He wasn't just fighting for a victory now. He was fighting for something bigger. For humanity's place in the galaxy, for the right to be seen as more than just a footnote in the history of the stars. Ahead, the finish line drew closer, but Michael could feel the Silurians' mech closing in. They were almost neck and neck. He glanced at the horizon. Nothing in his mind but the last obstacle, the vast sand dune that loomed just before the finish. If they could hit it first, they might just have the edge they needed. "Rachel, Jack, prepare for the final push," Michael ordered. "On my mark. Now." With a synchronized breath, the team activated every last ounce of power in the Titan's engines, pushing it toward the dune with everything they had. The Silurians followed, but they were slower to react. The final dune loomed like a wall of sand, its peak a few hundred meters ahead. Michael could see the shimmer of heat rising from its surface, the massive expanse of the desert beyond it. This was it, the last hurdle. The human Titan was already pushing forward, its engines roaring as it gained momentum. Michael's fingers danced over the controls, heart hammering in his chest as he focused entirely on the task at hand. "Get ready," he muttered, his voice low, intense. "This is the moment." Behind them, the Silurian Titan was a menacing shadow, its engines howling as it barreled toward the dune, intent on overpowering the humans with sheer force. General Vrox wasn't going to let up. Not now. His mech's plasma cannons hummed with deadly energy as it locked onto the human Titan's position, ready to fire at the slightest provocation. Michael's mind worked in overdrive, calculating angles, speeds, and trajectories. The dune ahead wasn't just a natural obstacle, it was an opportunity. The Silurian mechs, though powerful, weren't designed for the kind of quick, precise maneuvers required to navigate it. They had strength, but Michael had agility, and that would be their edge. "Rachel, Jack, we need that final burst," Michael called. "When we hit the dune, make sure the thrusters are at maximum power." The team didn't need further instruction. They had trained for this moment, rehearsed it countless times in simulations. The Titan surged forward, the roar of its engines filling their ears as it approached the towering dune. The Silurians were closing in fast. Vrox's Titan was only a few meters behind, but the human mech was starting to gain a lead. The towering dune was now directly in front of them, a steep incline that could spell either victory or defeat. "Hold on tight," Michael warned as they hit the base of the dune. The Titan's engines whined, and then, boom, they hit the incline, its weight pushing hard against the sand. For a split second, everything seemed to slow, the roar of the engines fading into the background. The Titan's front end dipped, and the powerful thrusters roared to life, pushing them upward with explosive force. With a sudden burst, the Titan shot up the dune, its boosters igniting for one last incredible surge. The mechs rocketed up the slope, the sand flying beneath them like a cloud of dust. The Xalorian Titan tried to follow but lost crucial ground as the incline disrupted its path. Vrox's mech struggled to adapt, its massive legs failing to find traction in the soft sand. At the summit, Michael's Titan reached its peak, its boosters roaring as it hit the apex of the dune. The finish line was within reach, just a few more meters. The Xalorians, for all their strength and power, couldn't make it in time. Now, Michael shouted. With one final thrust, the human Titan leaped over the crest of the dune and shot toward the finish line. The crowd held its collective breath. With a roar of triumph, the human Titan crossed the finish line, just as the Xalorian's Titan crashed into the base of the dune. Too late to catch up. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had not just survived but triumphed. The galaxy now knew one undeniable truth: never underestimate the humans.